Good afternoon, friends. So what is insulin resistance and why does it bother us? Insulin resistance is a decrease in the sensitivity of insulin-dependent cells to the action of insulin, followed by a violation of glucose metabolism and its entry into cells. During the meal, it enters the stomach, the pancreas secretes enzymes to break down this food and the process of digestion begins. By the way, carbohydrates begin to be digested in the mouth, thanks to the enzyme amylase, which is contained in our saliva, and continue to be digested in the stomach and small intestine. There, glucose from carbohydrates is absorbed into the blood. After absorption, monosaccharides, mainly glucose, leave the cells of the intestinal mucosa through the membrane facing the blood vessel, the capillary. A little more than half of the glucose through the capillaries of the intestinal villi enters the circulatory system and is delivered to the liver through the portal vein. The body stores glucose in the form of glycogen in the liver. He does this in case there is no food for the next few hours. Through the blood, glucose enters the cells for energy production. In order for glucose to be delivered to cells and energy to be produced, our pancreas produces the hormone insulin. The level of insulin in the blood rises in response to the increase in glucose levels after a meal. Insulin is what helps bring glucose into cells. This is due to the small insulin receptors that are on the surface of the cell. These receptors, as it were, catch glucose and carry it into the cell, where our energy is produced in mitochondria, ATP. It is thanks to insulin that the level of glucose in the blood decreases after eating, as insulin delivers it to the liver and cells. If a person constantly snacks and chews something, then the level of glucose in the blood constantly rises and does not have time to fall. As a result, our pancreas is constantly releasing insulin to bring this large amount of glucose into the cells and lower its blood levels. Receptors that already have a short life cycle, only 7 to 12 hours, simply get tired. They do not have time to recover and simply collapse. After you eat, your blood glucose levels rise and insulin levels also begin to rise to deliver glucose to your cells for energy. But the receptors no longer respond to this. Less and less glucose enters the cells, so blood glucose levels rise, as does insulin levels. The receptors continue to be destroyed, since glucose does not enter the cells, which means there is no energy. Because of this, you keep feeling hungry and keep eating again and again. Thus, this vicious circle occurs: high glucose, high insulin, hunger. This is how insulin resistance occurs, and then type 2 diabetes. This happens when your blood glucose and insulin levels are high at the same time. It is in this state of the body that a person is not able to experience a state of satiety for a long time. Due to the fact that little glucose is delivered to the cells, a person is constantly hungry. He wants to have a snack and eat something, including sweets, to fill the needs of the cells. By the way, the difference between type 2 diabetes and type 1 diabetes is that type 1 diabetes is incurable. This occurs when the pancreas does not produce insulin at all. A sick person is forced to deliver it to himself with an injection intramuscularly so that the level of glucose in the blood decreases. Insulin is a vital hormone. Without it, a person will have hyperglycemia, and as a result, a coma. This happens when the glucose level rises higher than 16.5 millimoles per 1 liter of blood. This is scary. The normal blood glucose level in a healthy person on an empty stomach, after 6 to 8 hours of fasting, is 3.3 to 3.5 millimoles per 1 liter of blood. The normal glucose level 2 hours after a meal, when insulin has delivered glucose to the cells, is less than 7.8 millimoles per liter. The range of normal concentrations of insulin in the blood is from 5.5 to 10 microunits. Limits fluctuations in insulin levels on an empty stomach, from 2.6 to 25 microunits. Under this video, I will write what tests you need to take and how to do it in order to check these parameters for you, if you have not done this for a long time or at all. Insulin resistance is also dangerous because insulin is an anabolic hormone. This means that it stores not only glucose in liver cells, but also fat in fat cells. That is, if you eat carbohydrates, which give the body glucose for energy, then your body will store fat in your fat depots, thanks to insulin. And if the level of insulin in the blood is constantly high, then this indicator simply will not allow you to lose weight. Because the level of the hormone that stores everything in the cells is high. Yes, you can lose weight by destroying your muscles and getting rid of water, but fat will remain in your body as long as insulin levels are high. Therefore, to begin with, you need to normalize the level of glucose in the blood and increase the sensitivity of cells to insulin with the help of interval nutrition. For example, this is what we do in the course, Health, Slenderness, Youth, during the preparation period. First we prepare, and then we enter ketosis to lose weight. It has already been proven that cardiovascular disease is much more likely to occur with insulin resistance. But this is a separate issue. Can insulin resistance be cured? Yes, sure. Now this is done quite successfully with the help of interval feeding and a low-carbohydrate diet. We will briefly look at what treatment options are available in another lesson. Also in our body there are hormones such as ghrelin and leptin. You must have heard of them. Ghrelin is the hunger hormone. Leptin is a satiety hormone. How do they work and how are they related to insulin resistance? Leptin is produced in our adipose tissue. From there, it enters the bloodstream, and through it enters our brain. As a result, it reaches the hypothalamus, in which receptors and neurons sensitive to it are located, which are responsible for the body's energy consumption. They are also responsible for body weight. Leptin acts as a switch that causes the body to either destroy fat or store it. Of course, leptin works in conjunction with insulin. For example, what happens when we change gears in a car? We are gradually increasing the fuel supply to the engine. At the first speed the car goes very slowly, and at the fifth, it rushes too fast. The same is happening here. Our body is much more complex, but it also consumes energy at different rates, or rather in two different modes, in abundance mode or in deficit mode. Switching between these two modes occurs precisely in the hypothalamus, and directly under the influence of the hormone leptin. In abundance mode, energy is maximized. This usually happens when we consume more calories than we expend. We have a lot of energy and the body spends it. Excess calories are stored as fat, resulting in an increase in the level of leptin in the blood. Leptin, in turn, informs the brain about the need to use its excess reserves. Metabolism is accelerated and fat is broken down. Appetite decreases because the body is satiated. Increases activity, endurance, and performance. What else is going on? Your mood improves and motivation appears. You want to do something and at the same time you are full of optimism, self-confidence. This happens at the beginning of the keto diet when the body realizes that a lot of fat is coming in. You have stress resistance, increased libido, and the level of sex hormones becomes optimal for the body. It also enhances immunity. But abundance mode is only possible if you don't have insulin resistance. Now we will consider the deficit mode. When we burn more calories than we eat, our blood levels of leptin naturally drop. The brain regards this as the beginning of difficult times, for example, war, famine, cold, and switches energy consumption into deficit mode. He forces the organism to exist with the motto, "I need to survive at any cost," and begins to save. This is the exact opposite of abundance mode. In deficiency mode, the following happens to the body: appetite increases, the breakdown of fatty tissues slows down, therefore, you need to eat if you feel hungry, there is a tendency to accumulate fat, and the motivation for physical and mental activity decreases. The brain saves energy. As a result, human performance decreases. Your mood worsens, signs of depression appear, self-pity. As a result, immunity, the level of sex hormones and libido are reduced. Deficiency mode is, in fact, the oldest function of our body. She saved the lives of our ancestors many times. For example, during the Great Patriotic War. I feel the onset of hunger, we literally cling to every calorie. And the brain, one might say, screams in our ear, "Don't move, don't make a single movement unless absolutely necessary. Save your energy, there isn't much left." Do you understand? Before the onset of insulin resistance, we are just constantly hungry, as little energy enters the cells. Therefore, even though you eat, the body is constantly in deficit mode. There is no energy. The body seems to be starving. Accordingly, all the features of the deficit regime are manifested. In this state, you can have a very strong appetite, a tendency to accumulate fat and increase your weight, lose motivation, worsen mood, more compulsive overeating, a decrease in immunity and sexual desire. This is how leptin resistance occurs. What are its reasons? Although, in general, this is already clear. The causes of leptin insensitivity that leads to obesity should be known to everyone. But we have already practically considered these reasons. They can be divided into two main types: physiological factors and nutritional factors. What are the physiological factors? This is a sedentary lifestyle, a complete lack of strength training or at least minimal physical activity, chronic stress, which many now have, sleep problems, you do not get enough sleep, chronic inflammation in the body, which most often occurs precisely with insulin resistance. What are the nutritional factors? These are regular overeating, the presence of a large amount of fructose in the diet, when we eat a lot of fruits and mistakenly believe that this is healthy, excessive consumption of sugar, excess carbohydrates, consumption of fast food and processed foods, which are high in trans fats and fructose, frequent meals and snacking, the frequent practice of fasting, combined with high physical activity, exhaustion of the body. By the way, this is what I talk about in the course when we go on a low-carb diet. I am against sports in the first month of the diet for this very reason. The body must begin to store substances in order not to experience stress. All of the above is insulin resistance. That is, when insulin resistance occurs, leptin resistance also occurs. This, again, like a vicious circle, causes hunger and fat accumulation. Under the influence of one of the listed factors in the body, as a result, an inflammatory reaction develops. During inflammation, levels of C-reactive protein, or CRP, rise in the blood. Muscle studies have shown that CRP blocks the actions of leptin. Simply put, leptin resistance is a combination of elevated blood levels of leptin and C-reactive protein. Moreover, elevated levels of leptin increase the production of CRP by liver cells and, again, a vicious circle is formed. That is, the more leptin, the more C-reactive protein and the more blocked the action of leptin. As a result, inflammation occurs and our insulin resistance increases. Now we will look at the hormone ghrelin. It is a human appetite hormone that controls the amount of food we eat. Ghrelin regulates intestinal motility and influences the synthesis of insulin and growth hormone. It is produced in the stomach in the absence of food and is a direct signal that the body is hungry. It sends signals to the neurons of the brain. Often people try to trick ghrelin into thinking that it will help them lose weight. However, in those who are overweight and obese, the level of this hormone is usually reduced. An important factor is that the production of ghrelin is closely related to the production of leptin. In fact, they are antagonists. Ghrelin is a peptide hormone. It is produced predominantly in the lining of your stomach. In small quantities, it is also synthesized in the duodenum, which is located after the stomach. In the pancreas, ghrelin is produced in even smaller amounts, and a little more in the brain and lungs. The body also starts producing ghrelin a few hours after your body has gone completely empty of food, including swallowing. And immediately after eating, the level of this hormone begins to decline. Ghrelin levels are exactly the opposite of leptin levels. The level of leptin, called the satiety hormone, rises after eating and decreases when you are hungry. With ghrelin, the opposite is true. Researchers say that the injection of ghrelin is directly related to the amount of food consumed. The more hormone is introduced into the body, the more food is eaten. At the same time, ghrelin does not affect the increase in a single meal volume, but increases the frequency of meals. Accordingly, if you have insulin resistance and leptin resistance, then the hunger hormone, as opposed to leptin, is disrupted. What conclusion can be drawn? First of all, you need to get rid of insulin resistance. We'll look at how to do this in the next lesson.